Have you ever come across something so unsettling that it feels like it shouldn't be there? I began, leaning forward as the fire crackled between us. The new rangers looked at me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. If you ever find a doll made of twigs and leaves hanging from a tree, remember Rule 15, leave it be. It was a late spring afternoon, and the forest was alive with the vibrant sounds of nature. Birds chirped in the canopy above, and the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. I was on a routine patrol, enjoying the serene beauty of whispering pines. As I walked along a familiar trail, I suddenly noticed a clearing ahead. It wasn't the clearing that caught my attention, though. It was what hung from a low branch in the middle of it. A small doll, crudely fashioned from twigs and leaves, dangled there, swaying gently in the breeze. It looked old, almost ancient, its form twisted and unnatural. A chill ran down my spine as I approached the clearing. The vibrant sounds of the forest seemed to fade, replaced by an eerie silence. I felt an almost magnetic pull towards the doll, a mix of curiosity and unease growing within me. As I stepped closer, the air grew colder, and I felt the weight of the forest's gaze upon me. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, staring at the doll. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, its craftsmanship both crude and unsettling. The twigs were bound together with what looked like dried sinew, and the leaves were brittle and darkened with age. The sight of it filled me with an inexplicable sense of dread. The forest around me seemed to hold its breath. The usual rustling of leaves and distant calls of wildlife had ceased entirely. It was as if the very presence of the doll had cast a pall over the area. I took a cautious step back, the sense of unease growing stronger with each passing second. As I stood there, contemplating whether to examine the doll more closely, a memory surfaced. The veteran rangers had warned me about these dolls, telling tales of their sinister purpose. They were offerings to the forest's dark gods, left by those who sought to appease the malevolent spirits that dwelled within whispering pines. Disturbing such an offering, they had said, would invite the wrath of these dark entities. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up as I recalled their warnings. The oppressive silence and the cold air seemed to press in on me, as if the forest itself was waiting for me to make a move. I knew then that I had to heed the warnings and leave the doll undisturbed. Slowly, I began to back away from the clearing, my eyes never leaving the doll. As I retreated, the oppressive feeling began to lift, and the sounds of the forest gradually returned. The birds resumed their chirping, and the rustling of leaves filled the air once more. It was as if the forest was breathing a sigh of relief. I made my way back to the ranger station, the weight of the encounter heavy on my mind. That night, I struggled to sleep, haunted by dreams of the doll and the dark entities it was meant to appease. In my nightmares, I saw twisted figures lurking in the shadows, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The new rangers sat in stunned silence, the firelight casting eerie shadows on their faces. They needed to understand the importance of this rule, the real danger that lurked within whispering pines. Remember Rule 15, I said firmly, meeting each ranger's gaze. If you ever find a doll made of twigs and leaves hanging from a tree, leave it be. It is an offering to the forest's dark gods, and disturbing it will bring their wrath upon you. The fire crackled softly, the night growing darker around us. The rangers nodded solemnly, their expressions resolute. They understood now the deadly nature of the offerings and the importance of following the rules. The fire crackled softly, casting eerie shadows that flickered and danced around us. The new rangers sat in tense silence, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of the flames. "Let me tell you about Michael," I began, my voice steady but filled with an undertone of sorrow. Michael was an adventurous soul, always eager to explore every hidden corner of the forest. He often dismissed the local legends and warnings as mere superstition. It was a warm summer day when Michael decided to venture deep into Whispering Pines. The forest was a vibrant tapestry of green, alive with the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves. Michael, ever curious, had wandered off the beaten path, seeking new sights and experiences. As he hiked through the dense woods, he stumbled upon a clearing he had never seen before. At its center, hanging from a low branch of an ancient oak, was a doll made of twigs and leaves. The sight of it piqued his interest. He marveled at the craftsmanship, the way the twigs were intricately bound together, and the eerie beauty of the leaves that adorned it. Michael's curiosity got the better of him. Despite the growing sense of unease, he stepped into the clearing, drawn to the doll like a moth to a flame. He reached out and gently lifted it from the branch, examining it closely. The air around him grew colder, and the vibrant sounds of the forest faded into an oppressive silence. Ignoring the sudden change in atmosphere, Michael placed the doll in his backpack, thinking it would make an interesting souvenir. As he continued his hike, the forest seemed to react to his actions. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees with an almost angry intensity. Shadows lengthened and danced in the corners of his vision, and an inexplicable feeling of dread settled over him. As the day turned to dusk, Michael's unease grew. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The once familiar forest now felt alien and hostile. Strange noises echoed through the trees, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and fleeting shadows that moved just out of sight. He quickened his pace, hoping to find his way back to the main trail before nightfall. But the forest seemed to conspire against him. The paths twisted and changed, leading him deeper into the unknown. Panic set in as he realized he was hopelessly lost. As darkness fell, the forest came alive with an otherworldly energy. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to close in around him. Michael's fear turned to terror as he felt an unseen presence stalking him. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves and the soft crunch of twigs underfoot, as if something was following him. Desperate to escape, Michael broke into a run, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees forming a maze of gnarled branches and twisted roots. He stumbled and fell, his hands scraping against the rough bark of a tree. As he lay there, the oppressive silence was broken by a low, menacing growl. He looked up to see shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The air grew colder still, and the whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, chanting in an ancient, unknowable language. Michael's final moments were filled with terror as the dark gods of the forest unleashed their wrath. The shadows enveloped him, and his screams echoed through the trees before being swallowed by the oppressive silence. When the rangers finally found his campsite, it was abandoned, his belongings scattered around the clearing. The only trace of Michael was the doll, now hanging back on its tree, seemingly untouched. The rangers knew then that his fate had been sealed the moment he disturbed the offering. The warnings were true. The forest's dark gods were real, and their wrath was swift and merciless. Michael's curiosity led him to a fate sealed by the darkness of Whispering Pines, I said firmly. If you ever find a doll made of twigs and leaves hanging from a tree, leave it be. It is an offering to the forest's dark gods, and disturbing it will bring their wrath upon you. As the firelight flickered and the shadows danced, I knew they had grasped the gravity of my words. The forest held many dangers, but none as insidious and malevolent as the dark gods appeased by the twisted dolls of Whispering Pines. The fire burned low, casting eerie shadows that flickered and danced around us. After Michael disappeared, the atmosphere among us rangers changed, I began, my voice steady but filled with a somber tone. We all felt the loss keenly, and the forest seemed darker, more menacing. It became clear that the warnings were not just superstitions, but essential rules for our survival. We decided to investigate further, to understand the true nature of these offerings and the dark gods they appease. We delved into the history of Whispering Pines, uncovering old records and legends that hinted at the origins of these rituals. Whispering Pines is an ancient forest, and its secrets run deep. Long before it became a protected area, it was a place of ritual and reverence for the people who lived nearby. They believed that the forest was home to powerful, dark gods who demanded offerings to keep them appeased. These offerings took many forms, but the most common were the dolls made of twigs and leaves. They were crafted with care and left hanging in the forest as a sign of respect and submission. The people believed that as long as the offerings remained undisturbed, the dark gods would leave them in peace. We found old journals and records from those who had lived near the forest. Their descriptions were eerily similar: a sense of foreboding, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and an almost palpable presence watching them. Those who ignored the warnings and disturbed the offerings faced dire consequences. After Michael vanished, we all became more vigilant. We knew we had to respect the rules and stay alert. The forest is filled with many dangers, but none as insidious as the dark gods and their wrath. We documented everything we could find about these offerings. We spread the word, made sure every ranger understood the importance of Rule 15. And we made a promise to ourselves and to those who had vanished, to always heed the warnings and protect one another from the forest's malevolence. As rangers of Whispering Pines, it is our duty to protect the forest and its visitors. But it is also our duty to protect ourselves from the ancient evils that lurk within its depths. We must respect the rules, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the forest's power. The night was filled with the whispers of the wind and the rustling of leaves, a constant reminder of the forest's presence. Stay safe, and remember, if you ever find a doll made of twigs and leaves hanging from a tree, leave it be. It is an offering to the forest's dark gods, and disturbing it will bring their wrath upon you. The fire crackled softly, the night growing darker around us. The rangers nodded again, their faces set with determination. They understood now the deadly nature of the offerings and the importance of respecting the rules. As the fire burned down to embers, the forest around us seemed to grow darker, the sense of being watched intensifying. The weight of the stories I had shared settled heavily over the group, a stark reminder of the malevolent forces that lurked within Whispering Pines. The night was silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The rangers knew now that the forest held secrets best left undisturbed, and that the dolls made of twigs and leaves were among its most insidious traps. Somewhere deep within Whispering Pines, the dark gods watched, silent and still, their wrath ready to be unleashed upon those who dared to disturb their offerings.